This is a loosely coupled show. This episode was recorded March 21st, 2020. In this episode, James and I discuss working remotely and how that affects teams, the communication, and the software we're building.
Yeah, well, I mean, both of us work remotely, so I think it's pretty appropriate maybe to talk about remote work, given that a lot of people are working
Starting
remotely
to do it, yeah.
now. I think, yeah, it's not regular remote work though. A lot of people, even like yourself, like your kids are home,
Yeah.
where they usually aren't. I mean, your wife is probably working overtime now, I would imagine, like crazy. Even if she isn't, you have to watch the kids.
Yeah, it's different. The
Yeah.
schedule's really thrown off, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's like somebody sent me a message just earlier, like, oh, well, you're working from home anyway, so nothing really changed. I'm like, well, it has a little bit.
Just a little bit. My kids
yeah,
are home and I have to watch them just a little bit.
Yeah,
you know.
it's changed a little bit. Yes, I work remote, and I've always, well, since this job, I've always done it. But it's not quite the same right now. But
Yeah. Then for people who don't work remotely, usually, I mean, even people who do, like, it doesn't even matter. It's like your kids are home, right? Like, that's kind of I think that's probably the biggest disruption, is that kids are home, and if you don't have someone to watch them, then what do you do, right?
yeah,
Like my situation, we have 8 kids and my wife is homeschooling them during the day. So like I work remotely and the kids are home all day, but we're kind of used to that now. My wife kind of handles that. So for us, actually not much has changed that way, but I can see for people who maybe they're single parents or they're just not used to having the kids at home. It's going to be a big shift.
Yeah, it's an adjustment.
Yeah.
I guess it's just familiarity. Like you figure it out. Like you just kind of figure it out. That's why I always was interested in. Are we doing this for real right now? Or are we? I don't even know. I guess I can just put this all together. Is I always wondered with like when I started working for the startup, just 3 of us.
Yeah.
And we were all remote right from the get-go, and we had to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it became the normal. Like you kind of figure out the tools, you figure out like all that nonsense early on of like not getting video working or your audio working. But we like now everything's just second nature about how we interact, and that it just feels normal now. Like it doesn't feel odd at all.
Yeah.
To do it. So like what you were saying is like it seemed like nothing really has changed that much for you, is because that's just your normal.
Yeah.
Right. So if you all of a sudden had to jump into working remotely, there's probably I can imagine some humps there, because it's just you're not familiar with it. Even if you're doing the office and you do some of the remote type stuff, like you're using whatever chat, Slack, Teams, whatever the case may be, and you're using video, whether it be Slack, Skype, we use Google Meet. It's still very different if you're all remote. And I've always heard that too, as well, with the like remote first, or if you're all remote, there's still a difference.
Yeah, because that's the case. I'm actually the only remotely officially fully remote person in my company. So there is a big difference from what you've described, where everyone's remote. In my case, I'm the only one remote, so it happens that I get left out on things a lot.
Exactly.
Which is no one's fault. It's just, it is the way it is. So yeah, I think, that there's different dynamics there for sure. I'm not sure how much that would apply to like people who are kind of thrown into it because of this stuff that's going on in the world right now. But yeah, I wanted to, like, one of the things when we talked about when we had come up with this little chat or whatever, I thought, what are some tips for working remotely that I can think of that have helped me? I'll just throw a few out there. probably one of the coolest things is Krisp.ai. I don't know if I've mentioned that to you or not.
No.
Okay, so I think the website is just Krisp with a K, KRISP.ai. So it's like a noise canceling software basically. So
Okay.
I'm using it right now. So yeah, basically
I
like
should be.
yeah, you should be.
Probably right now because you probably hear some steps. I'll have to like edit the
Yeah, that's
mute
fine.
out
Yeah.
certain parts.
Well, I think people, well, you should leave it because then it's like this is kind of like the situation right now that
Yeah.
people are having, right? So I think that's you keep it in. Um, but yeah, it like filters out background noise, like kids screaming and fans, and I'm by an airport, military base, so planes going by, like it's filtered out. It's pretty like I was very skeptical at first, um, but it's very impressive. Like it's just incredible, really. So yeah, basically you just install it and it appears as like a microphone. Like first you configure it and you say like, yeah, I want to use this microphone with it with Krisp. It can filter out your input or your output. So like I could filter my speakers, so it would actually filter out like your kids screaming and stuff if I wanted to. I typically don't do that, but I just use it for my mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's cool because it's like the way they built it is they use machine learning. So they just have like thousands of audio recordings that they had taken, and I guess use machine learning to train the software how to filter out, what's a real noise and what's not a real noise, and so on.
Nice.
And I think there actually is an aspect of AI, like real time, because sometimes there's a little lag where it's like you hear the background noise when you start a call, and then it kind of like it's weird. It's really weird. You can actually like hear it trying to like figure out what to filter for the first couple seconds, and it's just all gone right away. So
That's cool. I'm
yeah,
definitely gonna check it out.
it's cool. And then I think they just reduced their prices too, so it's like $3 a month, I think, if you pay for a
It's
year.
this is really awesome because like I said, normally, so as you can see from my background, I'm actually in my downstairs living room,
Yeah,
and you can hear my kids because they are home right now. It's a Saturday we're recording this.
yeah,
But originally when I started, I was actually in a separate room, and I felt too confined. So at that time, my wife was home with my son and daughter because we just had my daughter. And so then when my wife went to work and then my son was in school and then my daughter went to daycare, I was like, I'm just stuck in this room. I just felt secluded.
yeah,
So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to move my desk because during the day, nobody's here. I'm going to move it into this open area. So I'm in my downstairs. I'm like, you can't really see, but my TV's over there. You can obviously see the pool table there. But it's great when nobody's here, right? But now, like, the situation has changed a little bit, and I don't have any ambition to move my desk back
yeah,
because I like kind of being in here. So I'm going to check that out for sure.
yeah. And
Plus, because the other reason was because I started doing live streams. I was like, this is going to be a mess. Like me trying to do these in the middle of the day now. So I haven't done one this week because it's like, I don't know. I don't want to have to get them to like settle down. Like for the most part, when I'm working, I can disregard it.
Yeah.
Right. And they're just doing normal things. They're just talking, whatever. So, but they're upstairs and you can hear them. So like for doing my live streams, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it, but it sounded like it could work.
That's kind of same thing with me. Like I am in a room, but I can still hear them. I mean, I have 8 kids under 12, so
there's noise.
There's noise, yeah. So I mean, these headphones actually work really nice. Even without music, it's pretty good. But I usually have some sort of like music or even like a tech talk or whatever going on if I'm not doing like really intense work.
I used to have similar like kind of over the ear when I was like worked in an office and etc.
Yeah.
But once I was home alone and it just becomes I just use my speakers. I only use these when we're recording. I don't generally have them on.
Yeah, so. Why not? You could probably get like a huge stereo system in your downstairs.
My current setup here is not that bad, so that's what I use. Yeah, it's a little out of hand sometimes.
Yeah.
So Do
I'm
you
just going to
like?
throw out. Actually, maybe why don't you go ahead? Because maybe.
I was going to ask you about. So it's interesting that we're kind of in different situations of remote work. Where again, the company I work for, we're all remote, and like I said, we all just kind of figured it out, and it's the normal, right?
Yeah.
And I think when people join, which we had somebody join maybe just less than a year ago. I should ask him how it went, like, and how it felt to him doing this.
Yeah.
But I think because it's just we don't think about it, it's just how it works. So my situation, your situation is very different because you are, like you said, the only remote person. So how do you? Are you excluded from stuff? Obviously, it's not intentional. Um, but like obviously the theme of the podcast here show is related around software design and architecture. So how do you feel that plays a role?
Yeah.
Because obviously it's going to work different between the both of us,
Yeah.
I would assume, on how that works out.
Yeah. I would say that's a struggle the company's had. I mean, since I've been working remote. Um, I would say it's much better now. And I would say, so technically I'm a senior developer, and there's actually like hierarchically, if I can even say that word properly, there's two, like there's a lead developer who's technically like above me, however you want to put that on paper, right?
Yep.
And then there's another guy who's above him who are developers. So practically, it actually doesn't work out that way. I'm leading most of the projects, and I'm leading the design and leading the architecture of pretty much like the most critical projects. Um, so I'd say earlier on, not so much. It was harder because there were decisions that were made without me kind of knowing what was going on. And I intentionally try to document as much as I can and put, if there's a new product we're trying to, or a new feature that we're trying to do, then I will just like pump out as much documentation, not like useless documentation, but helpful stuff. Yeah, it's been a struggle because I'm sure you've experienced maybe at this job or another one where it's like, okay, guys, here's this document, and nobody reads it, and 3 months down the road, mistakes are made that were actually like addressed in this original document. That's like, I already kind of gave you the instructions and like had the foresight to predict that would happen, and here was the fix that kind of was there. That's happened a few times, quite a bit, I'd say, actually. But I'd say it's a lot better now, and I think that's because the manager has seen that happen quite a few times. It's happened so many times. It's like, okay, like we need to make sure people are on the ball. And I think part of that is just because everyone there is in the office, so they can just kind of like interrupt people and be like, hey,
Yeah, so it's
what's
like
this
it's
all
kind of
about? And
how do you communicate that when you're not there and you're not like not that you're I don't want to say you're like a first class citizen, but
yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like
I
you
know.
can't just interject
Yeah,
immediately with anything. Well, not you know what I mean? Like or you're not necessarily always a part of all those discussions
yeah,
potentially. Like you're missing out on some of them. Again, probably not intentionally. It's just
yeah,
if you're kind of thought as an afterthought, that's probably not a bad way to put it, but do you know what I mean? Like it's just you're
yeah,
just not sitting in the office and walk into somebody's office and talk to them directly.
yeah. I think part of it too is I mean, there's just the culture. I mean, in most companies, right? Like, okay, I can see the two people that I that are sitting next to me. Okay, guys, let's go downstairs in the meeting room and talk about this important thing. And yeah, I mean, it's happened where kind of these big decisions have been made where I hear about it kind of like off the cuff or
Uh,
whatever, and it's like,
yeah, you're
oh,
like,
I
what?
didn't know that was happening. actually that's wrong, or maybe there's a kind of a known issue with taking that approach. Like, let's talk about it. So it kind of goes
Yep.
back to what I mentioned before.
The one thing
Um,
that we kind of struggled with too, related to kind of like I guess related to this is, and I hear this the most with remote people that really enjoy it, is that the no interruptions thing.
yeah,
And
yeah, I
I
really
agree
like
with
that.
it. I really agree with it. And we kind of have a kind of guideline for um, like using Slack or whatever you're using, in terms of, because there are moments where you need to interrupt somebody, unfortunately,
Yeah,
because you are stuck with something, you need something answered. You know what I mean? The easiest example all the time is you're spinning your tires on some problem and you don't know what the solution is. You can just, if you were in the office, just walk up to somebody and say, hey, like, I got this problem, can you come help me? And yeah, you can do that asynchronously, but how much more time are you going to burn waiting for the person to reply to you?
yeah,
Right. So, and we kind of struggle with that. So our general rule, right, is if you just direct message somebody, try to have those notifications on and use it sparingly as much as you can to, and that's kind of our, okay, it's urgent-ish, right? Like, you've attempted to deal with something yourself, you can't go down that road, like, you know what I mean, and just try to interrupt somebody.
yeah.
But even that is difficult because it still requires, and I get caught all the time on it with Slack notifications, is that they work great when they're turned on, and I often, for the example of this, I'll turn off my notification, like in Windows. I'm using Windows, and I
Yeah,
turn off like I can't remember what they call it. It's like there's a setting anyways to turn off notifications. So I don't have, like, if I'm doing a talk or presentation, I always turn them off so I don't have something randomly coming up.
yeah.
And good luck if I remember to turn it back on, right? And then I'm working away, and then all of a sudden I look over and I see the little icon that has red on it in Slack saying that I have direct message. I'm like, oh crap! Like, right?
Yeah,
How long has that been sitting there? And then I realize somebody's been waiting for me for a half an hour. And it's like, well,
yeah. I've done
there
that
goes
too.
that rule, right? Like, that didn't really work out. Versus if we're in the office, I just would have directly walked up to somebody and said, hey, do you got a minute? So that's kind of that. I think that's one of our biggest pains, is somewhat that is, yes, you don't want to distract people, you don't want to interrupt people, but when you need to, and you need help, or you need to talk to somebody, and you don't want that to be asynchronous. Like, you
Yeah,
want that to be immediate,
yeah, and
right?
that's happened too. Like, we've had cases with like issues, like really bad issues in production, and it's like, I didn't know there was an issue until like an hour or two after the fact, because they were like in the office scrambling, right? Um, so then it's like, okay, well, I can try to help you now because I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Um, or things where it's like, we've had issues where I literally spent like a whole day trying to figure out why, you know, a memory leak or something, right? It's like we keep having to reset the web server every 10 minutes for the entire day and try to figure that out. And it's like, okay, guys, I think it's here, and I think this is going to fix it. And then it's like, oh yeah, we already kind of like went down that road, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that would have been nice to tell me.
Yeah, it would have
And
been
it's no
nice
one's
to know.
fault, right? It's not malicious or anything. It's just, I mean, it's kind of the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and that's the thing, right? Is, say you went to, I'm thinking about how that would work for us, is that all our communication for the most part is done two ways. It's we we almost do not use email. It's basically Slack and video chat.
yeah,
And the way that it generally is that if you direct message somebody, almost always, it's, if you got a second, jump in the room. That's the thing. And we just automatically just jump in the common room that we have and do what we're doing right now to figure it out.
so do you guys
Like,
have video chats often though? Like, do you find that helpful?
probably more than, if it's something direct, then yes. Like, if it's just, hey, we have a dev channel. If it's something just kind of, not really important, or just want to let it just to keep everybody informed. It's not urgent or anything.
Yeah.
I'll just post it in there. Or there are general channels, same type of thing to let other people know. But it's, if it's needed, like, and it's something I need to interrupt you for, like I was talking before, the general, I should have a macro or something to automatically type this, which is jump in the room. Because that's what we always say to each other, just jump in the room. And then we just jump into our video chat and then do exactly this. Like, it's second nature just to be in here.
Yeah. And that's kind of nice. That's a nice thing. I like that I can chat with one person. Like, I can have a video chat with one person that I want to interact with, as opposed to, like, if you're in the office, everyone hears what you're talking about and everyone else starts like interjecting or whatever, and or you can hear other people talking, and so I do like that aspect. Yeah.
It's a different. I can somewhat relate to what you're experiencing, because it's not second nature to everybody else just to realize that that communication but that they're having in person isn't getting relayed to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, like, everyone has been working remotely this week, of course, because of what's been happening.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'd be interesting
how that changes.
Yeah. I mean, for one thing, everyone's like, "Oh, I feel way more productive," and it's like, yeah, I'm not being interrupted all the time. And it's like, yeah, that's for sure. But I think probably the biggest thing is just the whole thing of documentation, or I think that's probably just the biggest issue, is people not reading it. Like,
the one thing that we do too, I guess, in terms of, like, I wouldn't say it's a tip, because I think it depends on a lot of things, just how stuff works, the individuals involved. But and this applies, like, because you were talking about, like, documentation, but, like, hey, describe a situation and here's how to fix it, and nobody read the doc, or whatever the case may be.
Or it's literally like requirements for a feature.
Sure. I'm not going on that stretch, but I'll just give an example of something. Is what we do now, and it works. It, depending on your team size, you would have to figure this out. Again, this is no silver bullet, one size fits all thing, but what we implemented probably, I don't know, a couple years ago, was the first thing we do in the morning is do a group review. So basically we go through pretty much every review as our team. So there's 5 of us in our team, and we literally do a group review. And the benefit of it is it's not necessarily like I feel like when we were talking about, like, architecture or design, it's the key points that I'm always trying to get across are the design things that are evolving, or we're learning over time, that we're starting to implement, that people may not realize that, hey, that was the situation where you shouldn't have done that, you should have done this, because we realize that causes us problems or something, or we found a better way to do that particular scenario. Let's do this now. So that doing those group reviews is the easy way to communicate it, that then everybody knows it. Does everybody get it? Sometimes, maybe not, but at least they all hear it and see it, versus having, like, direct one-on-ones. It always ends up being as a group, and then we can push that stuff forward.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I've noticed, not even being remote, I guess, is if the way I describe this is, I always say being if you're in a box, meaning that if you have a particular style of architecture that, and I can elaborate on this, that you can then kind of you kind of get stuck in a box, and for you to go outside of that box really requires you to go out of your way to do something different than what the kind of common patterns are that you see everywhere else when you're looking at code. So most often I find that if people have to implement something new, they're not going to go out on a whim just to create something completely off the top of their head in terms of how to implement it. they will use something else as an example
Yeah.
to then implement it, right? And that's kind of like the box, is like, if you kind of have like this, I don't want to say it's a template, but it kind of is, in a sense of, this is the style of how we do these types of things. You kind of just follow those patterns without really even realizing you're following them.
Yeah.
And like I said, to kind of go outside those lines, is, you can do it, but you really have to go out of your way to try to kind of circumvent the patterns that are implemented.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, like super helpful, because then people can make progress without feeling overwhelmed about how to implement something.
So
At
it's like a
least,
conventions, basically. That's what you're saying.
yeah. So like, I'll give you the examples. And if anybody is unfamiliar with my blog or any of the videos that I've done, I harp a lot on CQRS and vertical slices, and specifically how you implement that. And I actually just, somebody posted a comment on Twitter. You replied to it. I don't know if I replied to your reply, but I definitely replied to the same tweet, which was, somebody asked, like, how long should a branch be? Like,
Okay.
how
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
should a branch live?
Yeah.
And my answer was, like, days, like a day, 2 days,
Yeah.
because the reason being is that there's no reason almost for it at all. If you kind of get into these vertical modes of implementing features, the feature really doesn't turn on until you want it to turn on. And generally the feature itself is so contained, and so generally there's no coupling to it for the most part, other than when you want to at the very end.
Yeah.
So you're basically pushing dead code. Like, you're pushing code that's not being used at all until you want it to be used.
Now this brings up a whole other issue too, around. So like let's say, like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Um, and I've been introducing a lot of that kind of stuff to the company I work for. So feature flags, for example, can help with that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's so much, like, to I'm thinking, like, to be able to do that, and for other developers to understand how to do that, I've found um, can be a struggle for certain people to really understand how that works, because they're so used to, let's build the UI first, and then I'm just gonna shove my data into a database, and now I'm done, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I've introduced. We started. I mean, this could be a whole other session that we want to talk about. But basically, I started out. The way things were being done was just so difficult and so confusing. So I basically said, okay, let's do it a new way. And it's very like started with kind of a ports and adapters, clean architecture-ish approach, which kind of evolved more into the vertical slices. I personally found having, like, the data layer, I guess, and then, like, the infrastructure layer, having all of those separated into separate projects was just a lot of context switching, having to jump back. Like, it was kind of like, isn't this what this architecture is supposed to solve? Like, all this context switching. So instead of context switching, yeah, anyways.
I follow you. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with you.
so I ended up kind of, through trial and error, figuring out, like, well, there's nothing wrong with having, like, database queries in your domain project, as long as they're behind an interface, for example, and you just make sure your actual domain objects are not calling SQL queries or whatever. So now it's basically like, there's a domain. I mean, we can get into, like, bound context and all that, but basically it's like, here's one project that has my business logic, and yeah, there are objects like repositories or whatever that do SQL queries, but they're abstracted behind interfaces. And there's a top application layer, which is basically just command and query handlers. Um, and like this was before I even learned about all this stuff, right? About like secure S and blah blah blah. And yeah, like vertical slices is exactly what it is, right? Like let's just you build this one slice of functionality that's not coupled to all the other ones, so you're not, you know, if one of them breaks, it doesn't break the others. That's a huge benefit.
Yeah, I would say the other one too is like my mental model of thinking of this is, or at least the way I try to describe it is, if you were to think of a layered architecture as being like a layered cake, right? Where you have whatever, some UI, you have some data access, you have whatever the hell you want your layers to be, right?
Yeah.
Whatever those are to you. But in your cake being your application, and meaning those layers are over your entire app. That's what I think of when you refer to, like, you know, I mean, like having this context switching between projects, and think of each one of those layers as a project potentially. Yeah. I say think of that model, but then all of a sudden take that idea and start cutting slices into them.
Yeah, like slices of cake.
Yes. Yeah. And then so you can still have layers, but they're within the unit of the feature, which is the slice of cake.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that, though, is that I usually end up putting those things like in an organization matter, like actual source code, together.
Yeah.
So it's not projects of by technical concern, by layer.
Yeah.
You end up having basically folders or files, in my case, sometimes just one, that contains all those layers. Right? So that when you want to go to a particular feature, you're not jumping around. You're literally, potentially in most of our situations in the project I'm working on, you're oftentimes going to a folder or one file.
Yeah.
To do all that.
Yeah, that's kind of where we are now. But I will say that has been a struggle for most of the developers because it's so different. I mean, It was a struggle for me to start off. Like, there was a lot of trial and error, but yeah, going back to like what you're talking about, like this issue of having conventions, and there's kind of a clear way that we build things. That implementing that, even though that evolved and it's still getting a little bit different today.
Do you think everybody working remote now and that communication, because I mean, go back to the subject of remote here and how it affects us all.
Yeah.
How do you think this can change? Like, at least in your situation of, because yeah, communication is completely different now. So is everything so like there's already kind of patterns involved, so people are just going to follow what they already do within the app? Or do you think how you guys have to communicate now is going to change any of that?
I don't know. I would hope that it would lead to more documentation, like more of a focus on, let's write down everything we talk about. Let's write down, our decisions. And because like you said, you had mentioned like having the box, and then maybe you discover there's actually a better way to do a certain thing. Now you have to, like you said, every morning you guys meet and talk about those things, which would be really helpful. Those are the kinds of things that right now I'm mostly writing down and then saying, hey guys, go look at this. Very thorough, but I think some people struggle with having to read documentation, I guess. I don't know.
Just not fun.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot to it, right? Like, then there's like, well, you could pair program and someone's building something new for the first time, or you could do it on a PR, or like there's all different ways to help out with that. But definitely having those conventions, like in the case of this company, when I started, it literally took like weeks to months to like implement a new feature, like simple features. And then basically decoupling everything from the existing system, which is actually like a network of different systems. Yeah, just like very straightforward. Like Very easy and, oh, I'd say easy, but we'll say straightforward. And it's like, okay, I want to build this thing and just look at the previous feature that was built, use that, like you said, as a template for the most part. And even like the UI, we totally decoupled everything from the UI. So now it's like if we're doing new things, we're using Vue.js for the most part, and we just like embed new components onto the existing UI. So it's not tied to this legacy. I mean, there's like multiple legacy apps here, like VB.net. Um, there's some old MVC.net apps that use like a custom JavaScript framework. That's probably the biggest issue that we've had,
The
which
old
is just,
custom JavaScript
oh
framework.
yeah, don't even, yeah, that's a whole, we'll do a whole
Yeah.
session on that later
Yeah.
someday. But basically, yeah, now it's like you've got this nice, I'll say clean, but yeah, these kind of standard conventions. This is how you build it for the most part. And you hook it up to you have a component for your new feature that can be like a whole page if you want, or like a whole set of pages, or just like one little widget that you can drop into an existing area. And that's like literally features that have taken like months to build now take like a couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Like it's a huge, massive improvement. So I definitely get like what you're saying. Like if you have kind of these, this is kind of the standard convention. That makes a huge, huge difference for
Yeah, I think
sure.
at that point, right, it's a matter of still stuff's going to evolve. So it's just how do you convey or communicate what those changes are to your kind of architecture style or how
Yeah,
stuff's developed, because it does it changes. And then the thing that we notice, and it's just hard, is oh, we don't do that anymore, like we don't do it that way anymore. It's like,
yeah,
oh well, then I looked at this feature, or then I just did it the other day, I had to ask somebody, I'm like, I need an example of this. Like, what's the last thing we did that was just like this? Because I haven't done it in a while. So I'm like,
yeah,
what does that look like right now? Like,
yeah,
because the reality of it is, yeah, you would love to go back and change everything you have
yeah,
to use that new convention, but it's not, in so many different ways that is not feasible or practical, or like it serves no value potentially. Like, I mean,
yeah,
it could serve value for the long, like, but if it's working and it's segregated, then what it is what it is. Like, I'd argue it doesn't need to get, like, I don't know if there's enough value to actually go back and make and physically make that change that's under the hood gonna do nothing to the system. It's just gonna
yeah,
still work the way it is, just maybe using some new conventions. But that's a whole, I guess that's on a per case basis, but it's always trying to convey those things about the kind of the new way things are happening. Is kind of
yeah.
the
That's a
struggle.
struggle I've had too. Like, because I mean, pretty much I'd say I am the person who's been leading all the architectural changes, all the design changes, and kind of leading everyone else through those. And it's very evolutionary. Like it changes, right? It's like we're doing it this way. Like I'd mentioned before, where we started with a clean architecture, and that didn't really work. It was just too much context switching, and um, so then we just did a big refactor and made it a lot simpler. Where you still get the same benefits, but it's just kind of a simpler in how you structure your projects and stuff. A lot simpler. And now, I mean, my intention was to introduce like a lot of domain-driven design approaches, and obviously, like doing everything at once, like we're doing full domain-driven design. That's doesn't really work. At least didn't here. Um, I think especially for like, yeah, you want to introduce little bits here and there, and then once people see the benefit, then it's like, okay, this is actually like part of this domain-driven design. Let's introduce these other concepts that can actually add more of these kinds of benefits. And then yeah, then you get to the point where you're like, okay, like there's this new concept or tool, um, that now might be the good time to introduce. And the implication is we have to start moving things around and so on, which is kind of where we're at right now. So I can see like a lot of other people on the team feeling like, oh, things are always like changing. And I think the struggle is if you're not if you don't get it, that architecture is like, you know what I mean? It's definitely like this learning process, um and big part of it is like when I think of like what new things I want to introduce, I have to think about the skills and knowledge that the other people have and how comfortable they are with the things that have already kind of been introduced. And so yeah, I think that's probably the toughest part is knowing how much to introduce or what to introduce, especially to a company like basically they've been doing things like CRUD, everything CRUD, copy paste everywhere, massive stored procedures to do business logic. Like, so this is like a totally different, but now I think everyone sees the benefit. It's like, well, we have automated tests for a lot of our new features. It's a lot more, less bugs, more performant, easier to understand. And again, if you're creating something new, there's this kind of convention that you follow, and it's pretty straightforward, I would say. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's always more you can do, right? It's, especially right now, we're kind of we're leading a big project, basically trying to, like I said, they've got multiple legacy apps, and we're building a mobile app for all of these different products or some of these products, but some of these products are actually on like different like websites, like physically they're on different languages, different platforms. So now the struggle is, okay, we need to bring it all into one, at least the features we need to bring it into one place, like it basically bring it into like a domain layer, have one cohesive, here's this product, there's one application, if you will, that deals with that. And if you want to do something with that application, then you either call a command or you call a query. And then, all that logic is the website can just do what it, asks for what it needs to do. And the API can do the same thing. So yeah, I mean, there's just, and that goes into like, should we use microservices? Which no, not for this team, but you have those issues come up too, right? How far do you want to go, and how much complexity will this introduce, and is it worth the benefits? And yeah,
especially if it's a giant leap from what you're doing, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of one of the things that I always hear from when I go to conferences that are related to domain-driven design is, because we were talking about that, is I often hear the statement, like, read the book or went to this conference and we need to do this, or girls, like the organization, we need to do this, we need to do all of it, right?
yeah,
And it's like, that is totally not going to work. Right. So it's like, it's what you're saying is, how do you throw in, like, identify, okay, we're having these problems, maybe we can implement this here and start doing these things here. Like, here's something where we can do this that will be very beneficial to this pain that we're feeling. And it reminds me of kind of like what Steve was saying when we talked to Steve Smith, which was, he calls it pain driven development, right? It's like,
yeah,
just don't lay out all these things you're going to do, whether they're like technical things, whether they're like, technical patterns that you want to implement, whether they're organizational things or just communication, whatever the case may be. It's like, you just don't throw it all out there and, hey, we're just going to drastically change how we do everything, because you're going to get so much pushback,
yeah,
for one, probably. So yeah, it's like finding the right balance of how to sneak those those things in that that are going to And get buy-in too, right? If everybody knows, everybody's feeling the pain of it, and you say, hey, let's try this to see where this goes, one little kind of nugget at a time, and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think if you have a team that's willing to play around with stuff like that, that's definitely a good place to be in. I would suspect smaller companies that would happen more on smaller companies than larger ones. I mean, I can see maybe if you work for a company with like hundreds of developers, maybe within your one team, you could play around with different things, but then it's like, well, everyone uses the same source control repo, so it's like, well, ultimately we can't change the fact that the business is releasing every 6 months or whatever, right? So it's like, well, based on that, how do we improve things? It's tough.
Yeah,
I guess
it's
every company is different, right? And every team has different skill set, and yeah, some people think some ways to do things are better.
yeah, it's kind of getting all on the same page too, right? And like you said, the smaller those groups of their teams are, the easier it is to try to all band together and make the changes that you want to change. It's hard for me to relate to a lot of the bigger companies in those situations because I've almost exclusively only worked for like startups, and like half my career is working for startups. I never really realized that until
Yeah,
like a couple years ago, where I'm like, huh, let me think back about everywhere I've worked, and oh yeah, it's like the first three places I ever worked at were startups, and I never really thought of it before until now. So I've kind of had the luxury of that, I guess. I don't even know if it's a luxury. I don't know. I always hear just the red tape with bigger companies, but I
yeah.
haven't really had to experience it too much. I mean, I
I
did
think
a
if
little bit with like in consulting and having to deal with larger companies, but
I was
never
just gonna
directly
say,
inside of it.
I think if you're coming in as either like a consultant or an advisor, it's okay. But if you're actually like in the system, it's probably a lot more difficult with all the red tape and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
things
interesting because
slow
the
to
one,
change.
yeah, that I had a conversation at Explore DDD last year after my talk, and somebody was at, because I was talking a lot about service boundaries and communicating with the business, and I was giving examples of questions that I would ask various people in the business that kind of led to some kind of aha moments and discoveries that kind of shaped what we were building. And I had people ask me like, so, because to me, just talking to the business is like second nature. Like I have always had direct access to people.
Yeah,
Um, and that is obviously not the case for everybody, but I'm just so used to it that I take it for granted, maybe, of being able to sit down with an accountant and, you know what I mean, ask them or whatever it is. Like when I was dealing with um, like some of the warehousing distribution stuff, is yeah, the accountant's there. The accountant was kind of spearheading some of the stuff we were doing, or talking to the various managers, like in the warehouse and etc. Just doing that and being able to immerse myself, like almost job shadowing a lot of times, was,
yeah,
to me, that just seems second nature to do that. But yeah, I understand that in a lot of situations that's not probably the case.
yeah. I'd say that's not the case where I am right now. The last place I worked, it was the case. I guess similar to you, it was fine. It was kind of financial. Well, actually, yeah, two big projects that I was on. One was for an insurance company. One was for like a automotive financial thing. But yeah, a lot of interactions with business people there. Well, I think we're getting close to the end here.
Yeah, you got any other? I mean, we started this with this kind of remote thing, and then
Yeah,
I think somewhat with design and how that works with for remotely. I don't know if there's any other things I can. Everybody's been kind of giving their own 2 cents about the remote thing. I think my 2 cents is I think people will figure it out. I
I
think you
think
just
so.
work. I think you just everybody will figure it out
Yeah,
how what works for their team. I don't think what works well for my group works great for your, like, it's, I think you just, as a group, figure it out and know, as long as you're conscious about it, right? Like, of like what sucks, what doesn't suck,
Yeah.
and trying to turn down the suck and turn up the good, basically, right? Like, just, that's my biggest thing, is always just trying to optimize what's working well and get rid of the cruff that's not really serving you any purpose, or that pain, I guess. I don't know if you
Yeah.
got any other thoughts.
Yeah. I just think in general, like having butts on chairs is not really a good metric for anything, right? And I think if you have employees and you can't trust them enough to say work from home and be an adult, be responsible, then it shouldn't be working for you. Like,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think
so
that's fair.
I mean, I think it's tough for some companies who maybe have people they can't trust. But if I had my own company, then I would just I'd hire people that I not even you want to hire people you trust, but I think like part of that is like you want to treat people with that respect too, and I think that's kind of part of it too. If you're treating your employees like you're on a leash, it's like you're my pet. Um, yeah, don't be surprised if those employees actually aren't. You know what I mean? They're not going to be motivated, and you're going to bring them down. So I think for people, if you can find a company that gives you that respect, that goes a long way in
Yeah.
terms of like motivation and just feeling like you're respected. I think is a big thing, as opposed to like a taskmaster where it's like, here's all your tickets and you need to do them, which
Yeah.
brings up a whole other issue of am I just working to cross off all this work, or am I here to actually solve problems and collaborate and try to innovate and do some cool things for customers, right?
Yeah.
Two totally different things. But anyways, that's my
Yeah, the only thing I
two
got left,
cents.
I guess, to say is, for if you made it this long through what we were talking about, this was actually kind of our plan. So if you didn't listen to the first one, yeah, we want to have guests on, but I think we also want to just have these conversations about kind of maybe one topic and just see where it goes. Like, we didn't really have too much ahead of time for this, and that's
No.
actually kind of the plan. That may seem crazy, but we're doing it. I'm having fun doing it. So let's
Yep.
keep doing it and see where it goes.
I guess people can maybe listen to this while they're working or something.
Yeah, pretty well.
I don't think anyone's going to sit here and be like an hour staring at us, but
Yeah.
anyways.
Cool. All right. Take it easy, James.
Cool. Well, have a good day. Have a good
All
good week, I guess.
right. See you.
See ya.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loosely Coupled Show. If you did, please subscribe for more on software architecture and design.